When my daughter-in-law told me I was no longer needed, I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the kitchen, hands still wet from washing the breakfast dishes, soap bubbles slipping down the drain as her words echoed in my ears. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone was gentle, almost polite, but I could feel every syllable sink deep into my heart. "You've done enough, Mom. We'll handle things from here," that's what she said. And just like that, I knew my place in this house had changed. For years, I'd helped raise their children, packed their lunches, mended their clothes, rocked them to sleep when they cried. This home, this family, it was my whole world. But that morning, something inside me went quiet. I looked out the window at the little garden I'd tended for 15 years, the tomatoes, the daisies, the bird feeder the grandkids helped me paint, and I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe I've done enough. I smiled instead of crying. Because sometimes, when you're a mother or a grandmother, you learn to hide your tears behind small smiles. I've lived in this little town my whole life. A quiet place with one gas station, one diner, and a church that still rings its bell every Sunday morning. People here know each other's business, but they also bring soup when you're sick and wave when they pass your porch. My husband, George, and I built our home on the edge of town back in the late 70s. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a small porch, and a big oak tree that gave shade in the summer. George passed away 12 years ago. After that, my son Mark insisted I move in with him and his wife, Lisa. "Mom, it'll be easier for you," he said. "The kids will love having you around." And they did, at first. I became the early morning cook, the homework helper, the one who knew exactly where everyone's missing sock was hiding. I didn't mind. It gave me purpose. After losing George, the noise of family filled the empty spaces in my heart. Every morning, I'd wake before dawn. The house would be silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I'd make coffee for Mark, the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a drop of cream, and pack his lunch before he left for the hardware store. Lisa worked at the local clinic. She was young, organized, and always on top of everything. I admired her for that. She was good to my son, a wonderful mother to the kids. We got along well in the beginning, sharing recipes, folding laundry together, chatting about the neighbors over evening tea. But over time, things changed. It started small. Little things that didn't seem important at first. The way she'd gently move my things around the kitchen. The new curtains she put up without asking. Or how she'd say, "Oh, I'll handle dinner tonight, Mom," with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I told myself not to take it personally. Times change. People have their own ways of doing things. Still, I couldn't help feeling like I was slowly being moved aside, one kind gesture at a time. Sometimes I'd sit with the grandkids on the porch, telling them stories about when their dad was little. How he used to chase frogs by the creek, or how he once tried to build a kite out of newspaper and tape. They'd laugh and ask for more, and for a moment, I'd feel needed again. But then, Lisa would call from inside. "Okay, kids, time for homework." And just like that, my moment would end. I'd nod and smile, but inside, something small would ache. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who outstayed her welcome in her own family's home. I always believed love was enough. But love changes shape. And sometimes, people forget that behind every mom or a grandma there's still a person who needs to feel seen. Life in our town moved slow. Seasons changed gently, summer faded into fall, and then the long winters came. Every year, I'd knit scarves for everyone in the family. Even Lisa. I'd pick her favorite color, pale blue, and leave it folded neatly by her door. She always thanked me politely, but I could feel the distance between us growing. She started handling more things herself, the bills, the shopping, the kids' schedules. I understood. She was capable. She wanted control. Still, I missed being asked. I missed feeling useful. You see, when you've spent your whole life taking care of people, you don't know who you are when they don't need you anymore. I used to tell George that when we got old, we'd sit on that porch and watch the sunset every evening. We never got that far. So instead, I sat there alone most evenings, watching the light fade over the cornfields, listening to the sound of laughter inside the house. It wasn't that they were unkind. They were just busy. Living their lives. And somewhere in between work and homework and phone calls, I became part of the furniture, quiet, reliable, always there, but never quite noticed. Then came that morning. The morning Lisa told me I was no longer needed. It was a Tuesday, the kind of morning that smells like rain. I just finished washing the dishes after breakfast. Lisa came down the stairs in a hurry, talking on her phone, her hair still damp from her shower. When she hung up, she turned to me, and there was this strange look on her face, not angry, not cold, just decided. "Mom," she said softly, "Mark and I have been talking. We think it's time you take a little break. Maybe visit your sister in Ohio for a while." I froze. A little break, I knew what that meant. She kept talking, something about how the kids were getting older, how I deserved some rest, how they didn't want me overworking myself. But I could hear what she wasn't saying. She wanted space. She wanted her home back. I didn't argue. I just nodded. "Of course, dear," I said. "My bags are small anyway." She looked relieved, and that hurt more than the words. When Mark came home that evening, he didn't bring it up. He just said, "Mom, Lisa told you, right? It's just for a while." I smiled and said yes. But inside, my heart was breaking quietly. That night, I sat on the porch with the old photo album in my lap. Pictures of birthdays, Christmas mornings, tiny handprints on homemade cards that said, "We love you, Grandma." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I wiped them away before anyone could see. Because mothers, we don't cry where others can see. We cry in silence, where no one has to feel guilty for hurting us. I didn't know then that this little break would change everything. That leaving would be the moment my family truly saw who I was. But that's a story for another part of my life, and that's what I'll tell you next. 2 days later, I packed my things. It didn't take long. A few dresses, my favorite cardigan, the framed photo of George and me from our wedding day, and the little Bible my mother gave me when I turned 20. Lisa helped me fold my clothes, polite, quiet, efficient. We didn't talk much, the grandkids were at school. I was grateful for that. I didn't want them to see me leaving and think Grandma had done something wrong. When Mark loaded my suitcase into the car, he hugged me and said, "Mom, it's just for a short time. You'll rest, maybe come back fresh." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice enough to speak. As the car drove down the long dirt road away from their house, hoping, just once, someone might be standing at the porch waving goodbye. No one was. The house grew smaller in the distance, until it disappeared completely. My sister, Ruth, lived 2 towns over, a small, sleepy place with wide fields and kind neighbors. She'd always been the practical one. When I arrived, she greeted me with a hug and that same no-nonsense smile she'd had since childhood. "Well, look who finally came for a visit," she said. "Took you long enough." I smiled, though my heart wasn't in it. She could tell something was wrong right away. Over tea that evening, she asked gently, "So, what really happened?" I told her everything, about Lisa's words, about how I'd been feeling like a burden, how the laughter in that house didn't sound like it used to. Ruth listened without interrupting. She just nodded, then said something I didn't expect. "You gave your whole life to that family, Mary. It's okay to feel hurt. But maybe this is your time to find yourself again." I stared at her, confused. Find myself? I didn't even know who that was anymore. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. I helped Ruth around her house a little, did some gardening, baked pies for her church group. But every night, when I lay in that unfamiliar bed, I couldn't stop thinking about my grandkids. Did they miss me? Was Lisa cooking their favorite meals? Was Mark drinking too much coffee like he always did? I'd pick up my phone and stare at their family photo on the screen, the one we took last Christmas by the tree. I thought about calling, but I didn't want to sound needy. So, I waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. No one called. Not even Mark. I told myself they were busy, school, work, life. Still, every day that passed felt like a quiet reminder that I wasn't missed. Ruth tried to cheer me up. She'd take me to the farmer's market, or to the small town fair where people sold handmade quilts. But no matter where we went, I carried that emptiness with me like a suitcase I couldn't unpack. One Sunday at church, I sat beside Ruth as the choir sang Amazing Grace. I hadn't sung that song in years. As I mouthed the words, tears began to fall before I could stop them. Ruth gently squeezed my hand. After service, a kind woman named Ellen approached me. She said, "You've got a warm smile. We're starting a reading group next week, you should come." I almost said no. But something in her voice reminded me that maybe I still had more to give. So I went. The reading group was small, 6 women, all grandmothers like me. We read simple books, shared cookies and stories about our families. It felt nice. I found myself laughing again, even if just for a moment. But one day, Ellen said something that made me freeze. She said her daughter-in-law once asked her to stop visiting so often. She said it's too much. Ellen laughed softly. But I told her, family doesn't expire like milk. Everyone laughed, but my smile faded. Because deep down, I realized I hadn't fought back. I just left. And for the first time since that day, I wondered if maybe I should have said something that night. I took out a small notebook and started writing letters to my grandchildren. Not to send, just to write. I wrote about the garden, about the bluebirds that built a nest near Ruth's porch, about the cookies recipe I wanted to share. It helped, somehow. Each word felt like a piece of love that still belonged to them, even from far away. But the truth is, no matter how much I wrote, I still felt like a ghost in my own story. Then came winter. One evening, I sat by the fire, and Ruth came in holding her phone. "You should call them, Mary," she said softly. "It's been months. You can't wait forever." I hesitated. "What if they don't want to hear from me?" I whispered. She sighed. "You won't know unless you try." So, I dialed Mark's number. It rang. And rang. Finally, he answered. "Mom? Hey, wow. It's been a while." I tried to sound cheerful. "I just wanted to check in. How are you? How's Lisa? The kids?" He paused. There was noise in the background, laughter, the TV, life happening. "We're good, Mom. Busy, you know. The kids have school and stuff. Lisa's been working extra hours. How are you doing?" "I'm okay," I said. "Just keeping busy. Baking. Reading." Another pause. Then he said, "That's good. Hey, I gotta go, okay? I'll call you soon." But he didn't. I sat there with the phone in my hand long after the call ended. That's when it truly hit me. I wasn't part of their world anymore. Not even a small part. A week later, I got a letter, not from Mark or Lisa, but from my granddaughter, Emma. It was written in shaky handwriting, with doodles of hearts and flowers. "Dear Grandma," she wrote, "I miss your pancakes. Mommy says you're resting, but when are you coming back?" My heart cracked open reading those words. I wrote her back immediately, telling her I missed her too and that I'd come visit soon. But I never sent it. Lisa hadn't called. And I didn't want to cause trouble. Winter dragged on. My hands ached from the cold. Some nights, I'd wake up crying, not from sadness alone, but from the deep ache of feeling unnecessary. Ruth noticed. She'd sit by my bed and whisper, "You've always given, Mary. Maybe now it's time to receive." But I didn't know how. Receiving felt selfish. I was used to giving love, time, effort, everything. Then one day, I ran into Ellen again. She was holding a flyer, a volunteer program at the local school. "They need help in the lunchroom and reading sessions," she said. "You'd be perfect, Mary." Something inside me flickered, a tiny spark of the old me. So, I signed up. The first day I walked into that classroom, the smell of crayons and chalk hit me, and suddenly, I felt alive again. The children smiled, asked me questions, told me stories about their pets and favorite cartoons. When one little boy hugged me and said, "You remind me of my grandma," I had to turn away for a second to hide my tears. That small, simple kindness began to heal something inside me. Every day at that school reminded me that love doesn't end just because it changes shape. The ache in my heart didn't disappear, but it began to shift. It started to feel lighter. Still, every night, when I closed my eyes, I saw my son's face, and I prayed quietly, "Lord, let them remember me not as a burden, but as someone who loved them deeply." Then, one afternoon in late March, I got a phone call. It was Mark. His voice sounded different this time, tired, shaken. "Mom," he said, "Lisa's been sick. We've been so caught up we didn't reach out. I'm sorry. The kids keep asking about you. Could you come home for a bit?" I didn't answer right away. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course," I said softly. "I'll be there tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, thinking about what it would feel like to walk through that front door again. Would they be happy to see me? Would Lisa smile? Or would I just be a guest in the house I once called home? Either way, I knew one thing: I still loved them. And love, even when it hurts, is still worth showing up for. The next morning, I stood by the window at Ruth's house, watching the road stretch into the distance. A single suitcase sat by the door, lighter this time, not just in weight, but in expectation. Ruth hugged me tight. "Be gentle with your heart, Mary," she whispered. I nodded. I didn't know what waited for me, but I knew I couldn't hold on to bitterness. The drive back to town was long. The trees outside blurred into shades of green and brown, and with every passing mile, I felt a quiet storm build inside me, a mix of fear, hope, and something deeper, forgiveness I wasn't sure I was ready to give. When I finally saw the familiar mailbox, the one with Mark's name painted on it, my chest tightened. The house looked the same, but something about it felt quieter. The garden was overgrown. The swing set in the yard stood still. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening. Then the door opened. Mark stood in the doorway. His hair was messy, his eyes heavy. Behind him, I could hear the faint sound of coughing, a woman's voice. "Mom," he said softly. And suddenly, time felt like it folded, all those months apart melting away in that single word. He hugged me, not the quick, distracted kind of hug he'd given before, but a real one. One that trembled. When he pulled away, he looked down and said, "Lisa's inside. She's been sick for a while now. We didn't know how bad it was until a few weeks ago." My heart sank. I hadn't expected this. "Can I see her?" I asked. He nodded. Lisa was lying on the couch, a blanket draped over her. Her face looked pale, tired. But when she saw me, she tried to sit up. "Don't get up," I said quickly. I walked over and sat beside her, unsure what to say. For a while, we just sat in silence. The kind of silence that holds too much between two people. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to call you. I thought, after what I said, you'd never want to see me again." I shook my head. I was hurt, yes. But I never stopped wanting peace. She swallowed hard. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was overwhelmed, Mary," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I could handle everything: work, the kids, the house. And then you were here, helping in your own way, but I took it as interference. I was wrong." Her words broke something open in me, not pain this time, but release. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were thin, cold. "We all make mistakes," I said softly. "What matters is we try to make them right." Just then, the children came running in from the yard. Emma and Lucas, their laughter filled the room, and when they saw me, their faces lit up. Grandma Emma jumped into my arms, and I hugged her so tightly I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "I missed you, sweetheart," I whispered. Lucas tugged my sleeve. "Mom said you were on vacation," he said, his little brow furrowed. "Are you staying now?" I smiled and brushed his hair aside. For a little while, yes, Mark sat down across from us, his eyes wet. I should have called sooner, he said. Mark sat down across from us, his eyes wet. I should have called sooner, he said. There's no excuse. You didn't deserve that silence. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd once built this home with laughter and dreams. I forgive you, I said quietly. And I meant it. Every word. Over the next few days, I stayed and helped around the house again. Not as an outsider this time, but as part of the family. I cooked soup for Lisa, braided Emma's hair before school, and sat with Mark on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip behind the hills. It felt like a slow mending, a wound that had finally been cleaned and allowed to heal. But one night, as Lisa rested in bed, she called me into the room. She looked at me with soft eyes and said, "Thank you, Mary, for coming back. I don't know how much time I'll have to fix things completely, but I want you to know, I see now how much you loved us. I see it in everything you did." Her voice broke mid-sentence, and I placed my hand over hers. "You don't have to fix anything," I whispered. "Just rest. We're family." That's enough. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat by the window. The moonlight fell softly across the old photo of George and me, the one I had packed months ago. I smiled through my tears. Maybe love doesn't vanish when people forget. Maybe it waits, patiently, until someone remembers again. A few days later, I decided to stay for good. Ruth understood. She hugged me before I left her house and said, "You've always been the heart, Mary. Go where you're needed." When I returned to Mark's home, Lisa was getting stronger. She smiled more. The kids followed me everywhere, asking me to bake, to tell stories, to sit beside them. The house felt alive again. One morning, as I flipped pancakes, Mark walked in quietly and said, "You know, Mom, Emma told her teacher you're her best friend." I laughed softly. "Did she really?" He nodded. Then his voice lowered. "I think she gets that from me." I looked up at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw not the man who had forgotten me, but the boy who used to bring. Tea wasn't a perfect ending. But it was real. Lisa still had good days and bad days. Mark still worked long hours. And I still felt lonely sometimes. But now, the loneliness didn't ache. It reminded me that love, when given freely, always finds its way back home. After that painful night, the house felt like a stranger to me. Every sound, every footstep, every laugh from the television, carried a weight it never had before. I tried to keep my distance, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I needed to protect whatever was left of my heart. Days turned into weeks. I spent more time on the porch, watching the road disappear into the horizon. I began to notice small things I had ignored before, the hum of the wind through the trees, the way the evening light fell across the fields. Life outside still moved gently, even when inside, mine felt stuck. One morning, I decided to walk to the market in town. The path was quiet, lined with old wooden fences and the sound of birds. People nodded and smiled as they always did. In small towns, everyone knows each other's business, but they also know how to stay kind. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris," someone said. I smiled back. For a moment, I felt human again, not just the unwanted grandmother in her son's house. At the market, I saw Mrs. Collins, my neighbor from across the fields. She had always been gentle with me. "You look tired, dear," she said, patting my arm. I told her I was fine, but my voice betrayed me. She looked into my eyes and nodded as if she already knew. "Family trouble," she said softly. "It happens. But don't let it break you. Children forget what mothers give them, but one day, they remember." Her words stayed with me all the way home. That night, I sat at my little desk by the window and began to write. I wrote letters to my son, to my daughter-in-law, even to my grandchildren, letters I never meant to send. In them, I wrote not of blame, but of love. I wrote about the nights I rocked my son to sleep, about the first time he called me mama, about how proud I was the day he built this house. Writing helped me breathe again. It reminded me of who I was, someone who had loved deeply, even when that love wasn't returned the way I hoped. Weeks later, on a Sunday morning, I woke to a knock on my door. It was my grandson, Ben. His small face looked uncertain, his hair messy from sleep. "Grandma," he said softly, "Dad said you might come to breakfast for a moment." I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, his bright eyes, his innocence, and I saw something in him that reminded me of my son when he was small. I followed him to the kitchen. My son was there, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee. My daughter-in-law stood by the stove, stirring something in a pot. The air was tense but not cold. My son looked up. "Mom," he said, his voice low, I'm sorry for how things have been." He hesitated, glancing at his wife, who kept her eyes down. "We've been under a lot of pressure lately. Work, bills, the kids. I didn't mean for things to get so hard for you." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I reached out and put my hand on his. "I know, dear," I said softly. "Life gets heavy sometimes." I just wanted to feel like I still mattered. My daughter-in-law turned slowly, her face red with emotion. "You do," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I grew up differently. I'm still learning how to live with family close by." We stood there, in that small rural kitchen, surrounded by the smell of eggs and coffee. It wasn't perfect. The air was still heavy, but something had shifted, a quiet understanding, a soft forgiveness. After breakfast, I helped her wash the dishes. We didn't talk much, but every few minutes, she'd glance at me with a small, genuine smile. And that was enough. Over the next few weeks, things began to mend in small ways. My son started joining me on the porch in the evenings. Sometimes we didn't talk, we just watched the sunset. My daughter-in-law began asking for my help with little things, gardening, sewing, even cooking the old family recipes she once ignored. The children would sit by my feet, asking for stories about when Dad was little. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't come all at once. It's like planting seeds in dry soil, it takes time, patience, and quiet care before you see anything grow. One afternoon, while I was hanging clothes on the line, my son came out holding an old photo album. "Mom," he said, smiling faintly, "remember this?" He flipped to a picture of me holding him as a baby, both of us laughing. "I forgot how much I owe you." Tears filled my eyes. "You don't owe me anything, son," I whispered. "You just live a good life. That's all a mother ever wants." In that moment, I felt something lift inside me. The bitterness, the sadness, it didn't vanish, but it softened. I realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the hurt. It's about choosing peace over pain. Now, every morning when I wake up and look out over the fields, I feel grateful. Grateful that I stayed. Grateful that I didn't let anger steal the years I still had with them. My family isn't perfect, but neither am I. And that's the beauty of it. We love, we break, we forgive, and somehow, we keep finding our way back home. Sometimes, late at night, I still sit by the window and write. Not letters of sadness anymore, but notes of gratitude, reminders to myself of how far we've come. And every time I hear my grandson's little feet running down the hall, calling, "Grandma," I know that love, no matter how bruised, always finds its way back. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of our home. The bitterness that once hung in the air was replaced by something quieter, something softer. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it makes it easier to breathe again. One golden evening, I sat on the porch with my son and grandson. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the fields stretched endlessly before us. The same road I once thought I'd walk away on now looked peaceful, like it was leading me back to where I truly belonged. Ben, my grandson, was telling us about his school day, his words spilling out fast, full of excitement. My son smiled as he listened, his arm resting comfortably on the back of my chair. There was no tension now, no invisible wall between us. Just family, quietly sharing the kind of moment I once feared I'd never have again. I turned to him and said softly, "You've built a good life here, son." He looked at me, his eyes full of the man he had become, and the boy he once was. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom, he said. I just didn't see it before. I smiled, my heart swelling. Sometimes, it takes distance to see what's close, I said. But love always finds its way back. He nodded, and for a moment, we sat in silence, listening to the evening sounds, the crickets, the distant bark of a dog, the wind rustling the trees. Life in a small town is made up of moments like these. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just simple peace. Later that night, as I tidied the kitchen, I caught sight of the family photo on the counter. It was new, taken just a few days ago. All of us together, smiling. My son's arm around my shoulders, my daughter-in-law standing beside him, holding Ben's hand. I traced my fingers gently over the photo frame, feeling a wave of quiet gratitude. There was a time I thought I had lost everything, that love had run out of room for me. But what I've learned is this: love doesn't disappear. It just hides behind pride, fear, and misunderstanding. And when we choose forgiveness, it steps back into the light. That night, before I went to bed, I wrote one last letter, not to my son, not to my daughter-in-law, but to myself. It said, "You did not fail as a mother. You loved, you gave, and you stayed. You found peace where pain once lived. And that is enough." I folded the letter and placed it inside the photo album, between the pages of my son's childhood pictures. It felt right to keep it there. Next to the story of where we began. Now, every morning when I open my curtains and the first light touches the fields, I whisper a quiet thank you to life, to time, and to love that heals even the deepest wounds. We still have our ups and downs. There are still moments of misunderstanding, tired days, and long silences. But there's also laughter at the dinner table, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, and the sound of my grandson's footsteps running toward me. Sometimes, the people we love hurt us, not because they stop caring, but because they forget how to show it. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't just a gift we give others, it's a way to set our own hearts free. So if you ever find yourself feeling forgotten, remember this: your love still matters. Your presence still shapes the lives of those around you, even if they don't always see it. Because in the quiet corners of every family, beneath the arguments, the silence, and the pride, there's still love, waiting to be remembered. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bring us home again.